Welcome in to Big Ten Today. I'm Anthony here, and somehow Andy Katz has made it in from Seattle. Big Ten Today presented by Walmart. And Andy, I gotta be completely honest, man. Just watching you throughout the weekend, you're with Lisa Byington, Robbie Hummel, Jalen Rose. You're in Seattle. I was thinking you're going to be somewhere like 30,000 feet in the air. You made it back in time.
It's all about teleport. You know, here I am. It's really not me. I'm sort of a hologram right now. But look, no, I made a commitment. I made sure I was right here in the flesh after an unbelievable evening in Seattle. Just, a few hours ago, it seems.
Oh, man, it just happened only a moment ago, and what a moment it was. That is today's big story because you were there for it, Andy Katz. It feels like we were all there, but for the women, UCLA has made their way to the Sweet 16. They defeated Richmond 84-67, nip and tuck throughout the first half, and then Lauren Betts and the Bruins took over as they were able to, and we certainly know that that is what they like to do. And speaking of things they like to do, Michigan State got out and ran. They are one of 4 teams who have qualified for the Sweet 16 in Big Ten men's basketball. Not only the Spartans, but the Terps, the Boilers, and the Wolverines. Let's hear from the victorious Maryland Terrapins at the podium after that magnificent shot by Derek Queen.
First, that was my first game winner, and when Coach drew up the play, my teammates trusted me, and he trusted me. I was a little bit nervous, but I knew we was due for one, and I had to make this.
Give Colorado State a lot of credit. They're an excellent basketball team. I feel bad that they had to go that way, but I really felt like maybe we were due eventually for one of those to go for us.
Andy, you guys did a fabulous job covering that, just in leading up to that moment. But let's start with Maryland. There's so much great news out of the Big Ten and men's basketball, but you were there on site watching the Terps do work, and I would love to start just with that final shot because part of the storyline for Maryland this season has been that they've lost those close games. They've been defeated by buzzer-beating game winners. It went their way this time.
Yeah, I mean, first off, they played phenomenal on Friday night. And then they got off to a really slow start, which, as Kevin Willard said, you had to really credit Colorado State because they popped them early. And Nick Clifford, he's going to be in the NBA. He was great. Jalen Lake hits big shots for Colorado State. So they're on their heels, Maryland. They got to mount a comeback. And Lake hits that shot, and you could feel, and I was standing right by the Maryland bench, you could feel this deflation. But they had a timeout. And they had some time left on the clock. So I wasn't in the huddle, but I was behind their bench, and I couldn't hear what ultimately they told me after the game. But what was great was they have confidence in each other. And it was interesting when you think about this as an experienced team outside of Queen in terms of college basketball, but not in terms of NCAA tournament games. They'd played a total of 920 total college basketball games, but only 5 NCAA tournament games heading into the tournament, only 2 by Julian Reese, the starter. So Queen's never been in that position in the tournament. And for him to hit that shot, for him to call for the ball in that huddle with 3 seconds left, that just shows immense maturity. He is mature beyond his years. You know, he's so likable, high character. He's willing to learn. But in that moment, I'm not going to say exactly what he said, but he called for the ball, and what's great is Kevin Willard had confidence in him, and not just Kevin Willard, but Julian Reese, all those 3 guards that are veteran players. They all knew that Derek Queen was the best player on the floor, both teams, and it was his job to get that and to take that shot and look at, coming across X and everything, just the compliments all over the place. It was just unbelievable to be there, to talk to him after. And for them, as Kevin said, Northwestern, Michigan State, Michigan, sort of Ohio State because it wasn't at the buzzer, it was with 3 seconds left. They were due.
Right.
But they also had the best player on the floor who came through. I don't want to hear about a travel because I don't think it was. Gene Steratore, who was the
the rules analyst.
Rules analyst for CBS and Turner. Look, he said he didn't think it was either. So I'm glad they didn't call it. It was a great no call. Unbelievable moment. A March Madness moment for the ages.
And I mean, when you think about the opening weekend, that was really the lone true
Yes.
buzzer beater that we got from the first round of the tournament.
First
Alabama
weekend.
State had one, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
they had one in the first 4.
Exactly.
But actually, that wasn't like, I'm trying to remember. I think there was a little tiny bit of time left.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. but
Game winner late, but
this one was literally at the buzzer.
and strategically for Kevin Willard to allow them to advance the ball, get it to half court, and then call a timeout like you're referencing. So there's 3.7 on the clock. And in my mind, out of these amazing 5 starters, Julian Reese is the only guy who you're thinking with 3.7. All right, they're not likely going to give the ball to him, but the other 4 individuals are all great options with 3.7 to go. What did you make of the fact that it was the freshman, Derek Queen, the big man? Like, it's one thing for this to be his first game winner. Part of that is because he's a big man. You usually give the ball to the guard in these scenarios.
True, but Derek Queen has guard skills.
Yes.
We've seen it so often that he can handle the basketball like that. And by the way, he went up against a former Big Ten player in Ethan Morton, and he's got great size on him. Now, Morton did a great job. Purdue fans, obviously Big Ten fans, know him very well. Tremendous teammate for Colorado State. He was a great leader. Not a great scorer, never was at Purdue, but did all the little things. And he was a pretty good defender in this second round game, but it was a mismatch for him to try to guard Derek Queen, who could put the ball on the floor. But he had such great presence, knowing time and score, and released it right at the last moment that you could.
Same hand,
kisses the
same
glass.
foot, off
I mean,
balance.
falls down, falls in. I mean, it was absolutely a spectacular moment. And look, I actually picked Maryland to get to the Final Four out of the West.
Okay.
You know, Florida struggled with UConn. They ultimately prevailed. But I do think Florida is beatable. It's going to be a real neutral court in San Francisco. I mean, no one's going to have an advantage there. The other side is Texas Tech, Arkansas, both more than formidable opponents. There's going to be a lot of talent in that region, but no one's going to have a home court in San Francisco. So, you know, it's not going to feel like that. Because I'll be honest, Colorado State, which you would think, and they should, they had more fans than Maryland. They were louder in Seattle, which makes sense. But it was a great moment for college basketball, for Queen, for the Big Ten, everything.
So you have one fan base for Maryland that feels like they're starved of deep tournament runs, second weekend and beyond. And then you have the Michigan State fan base who just feels like this is what they do. Now 16 times that we've seen Tom Izzo get to the stage that the Spartans are at right now. And the second half, very different than the first half for Sparty. And in that game, in the second half, when they got out into the open floor, they began to get running. Jace Richardson was not the guy who we've seen dominate offensively in that same way. But the depth of the Spartans has been such a storyline for them this season. It showed up again where only one starter was in double figures, and they still were able to take control of the game.
But you know what they did, and led by Jaden Akins? They hit big shots when it mattered most. Again, another Big Ten reference here. Richard Pitino, former Minnesota coach,
right.
doing an outstanding job down at New Mexico. Donovan Dent, he's an All-American. Nelly Jr. Joseph, they did a great job of really pushing and testing Michigan State. They led, obviously, for most of that first half, and really was back and forth before Michigan State could create a little bit of separation late, which was a great test for the Spartans. And now they advance to Atlanta, where we'll see if they, I mean, we're going to talk about Michigan later. I mean, we got 2 Big Ten teams in there. Basically, for a Big Ten team to get out of Atlanta to the Final Four, one, if not both, they're going to have to go through Auburn, and they're the top seed. So this was a great win for Michigan State. They really got pushed by the Mountain West Conference regular season champs, and we saw the depth of Michigan State on display, different players coming up at the right time. They've got experience there. And what I love is that Jaden Akins was the guy when it mattered most. He has been loyal. He's stayed true to Michigan State, and he hits the big shots to get Michigan State back to the Sweet 16.
And the way that the Spartans get into the open court and how that seems to engage so much of who they are, because, you know, from a perimeter perspective, where we had the one, you know, I suppose complaint about the Illini throughout the season was, are they truly a three-point shooting team? They seem to think so, but the stats didn't necessarily showcase that. Michigan State seems to know who they are offensively. It's going to be a low volume. They've shot them better as of late, but their identity is about defense and defense turning into open court basketball for them. Can that lead them on a deep run while still having what feels like some offensive limitation?
Yeah, I mean, look, I like their matchup against Ole Miss. I think they've got more depth, more options. I think they can run on Ole Miss. Now, Chris Beard, This is actually a rematch of coaches from the 2019 Final Four when Beard was coaching Texas Tech and Texas Tech beat Michigan State. Last time, obviously, they were in the Final Four. So this is going to be a really intriguing matchup. Two experienced coaches at this stage. On the other side, as we know, and we'll get to that later, but I mean, Auburn obviously is the behemoth here. I mean, that's the one matchup. They didn't match up against each other in Maui. I was there. But that's the one that I know Michigan State obviously feared because of Janai Broome and that size inside that Auburn has. We'll see if it happens. We'll see if Michigan can beat them. But there's no question that Michigan State is trending in the right direction.
There's no doubt about that. We will continue to watch, of course, the Spartans as they move forward. And we'll talk more later in the show about the other Big Ten teams that have qualified for the Sweet 16. But in a very busy weekend, there's some news that was expected to break, and it did break officially as of just today. It is the Iowa Hawkeyes, where they moved on from Fran McCaffrey, and Beth Getz, the athletic director, she and the athletic department in Iowa City have announced that Ben McCollum, born in Iowa City himself, will now be the next coach of Iowa men's basketball for national championships at the Division II level, and where, Darren DeVries was one of the names that folks in Iowa City were hopeful about. He gets the Indiana Hoosiers job, but Ben McCollum, the next guy who folks are hopeful about, and Beth Getz and Iowa made this happen. How big of a hire is this for the Hawkeyes?
It's great, and I'm not just being a shill because we're here on the Big Ten. These are legit great hires with all Drake ties, by the way, with DeVries to Indiana and Ben McCollum to Iowa. Look, I don't care what level you're in. You win, you win. He wins regardless of where he is. Look what he did at Drake this season, bringing 4 players from Northwest Missouri State that won national championships, led by Bennett Sturts, who I would expect will likely follow him to Iowa City. He was a Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year. He's a big shot maker. Style of play, it will be different than Fran McCaffrey. They're going to be a more low possession team than really going up and down, but they're going to defend better. And, look, Fran had a great run. They won a lot of games. They scored a lot of points. There was a little apathy at the end in terms of the crowds and all that. But there's no question. And I do believe sometimes in college basketball, in men's or women's, you can sometimes stay somewhere too long. And this might have been a case. And look, I know it's a hop, skip, and a jump, Northwest Missouri Drake to Iowa. But he can coach. I have no question, there's no doubt that Iowa was going to be right back in the mix to be a potential NCAA tournament team with Ben McCollum at the helm.
Like you said, he's won everywhere, and he's still only 44 years old.
Yes.
Somehow, as long and successful as his head coaching career has been, he's 44 years old, so he could be there for a long time if things go right at Carver Hawkeye Arena. A lot more from Andy Katz as we continue the basketball conversation here. A couple of more Big Ten teams have qualified for the Sweet 16 in men's basketball. We will talk about the Boilers and the Wolverines, as well as get out onto the ice. Championships being crowned in hockey as well. Who knows? Maybe more news breaks on Big Ten Today. It was number 1 versus number 2 in the women's Frozen Four final. Ohio State took on Wisconsin, and the Badgers, after 18.9 seconds remained in the game, they were able to tie it, send it to overtime, and then the Badgers came up with the big goal to seal it and win the Frozen Four, win the national championship for the Wisconsin Badgers women's ice hockey team, 8th national title in program history. Afterwards, their coach, Mark Johnson, addressed the media.
I'm still trying to process the whole last 18 seconds of the third period and then overtime, and obviously we found a way to win. I don't think we played one of our better games, but as I told the team a few minutes ago, they figured out how to get to the finish line. And as I've always said, Monday always comes. Well, Monday's coming tomorrow, and we've got the national championship trophy back in Madtown, so it's a good day.
Could not agree more. A good day for the Wisconsin Badgers in women's ice hockey. Good day, good weekend for the Big Ten and men's basketball. A couple more teams we haven't discussed yet, Andy Katz, that have qualified for the Sweet 16. The team that was the national runner-up last year, the Purdue Boilermakers, I would say not everyone expected them to get to this point and even making the Sweet 16 after losing Zach Edey, 2-time National Player of the Year. But they've been able to control the action through a couple of games here. What have you made of the Boilers?
Well, first off, all rounds are not created equal. neither of the brackets, but you only play who's in front of you. This happens all the time. There are upsets, and suddenly you're not playing a top seed. So they played High Point, dispatched them. Then they get McNeese instead of Clemson, which was obviously a big plus. McNeese was Cinderella for a day, and then it ended. It struck midnight pretty quickly for them.
And became a popular pick, right? There were some folks thinking McNeese would upset Purdue.
And maybe that did upset Purdue and challenge them.
I see what you did
But look, Braden Smith, TKR, they stepped up. This was a good balanced effort, and Purdue advances to the Sweet 16. You know, I kind of feel like right now there is no pressure on the Boilermakers heading into Indianapolis, where they're going to take on a Houston team that arguably is not just one of the toughest and best defensive teams, but certainly one of the favorites as a top seed. They're going to have a great crowd at Lucas Oil. It's not at Cambridge, it's Lucas Oil. You're also going to have Kentucky and Tennessee there. It's going to be a great atmosphere in Indianapolis. But I think Purdue goes in loose. They did not play well in the Big Ten tournament. They've sort of reset themselves. Now let's see what happens. You know, if they can knock off Houston, they certainly can beat Kentucky or Tennessee. So it'd be crazy if they could get to the Final Four. But it could happen. The biggest hurdle, of course, is the first one against Houston.
Oh, yeah. Matt Painter catching Frisbees after the game, though. They just like Danny Hurley did. Who knows? Maybe that leads to a national title. He seems to be feeling good, though, about the results of his squad so far. First-year coach, so as long as Matt Painter has been in West Lafayette, we know Dusty made his first season in Ann Arbor. He's got the Michigan Wolverines in the Sweet 16 as well. This worst-to-first storyline for Michigan has been something special to watch it play out. A lineup that's revamped, but 56 points they put on the board in the second half of that game. Got the offense rolling, I would say, from a bit of an unexpected source in the way that they really got rolling. Some individual players, you know, we've seen Trey Donaldson have his moments. We know what Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden has been capable of a variety of times here. But to have it be, you know, an individual player score 10 points in a row and take the game over in that fashion, Michigan now feels to me a little bit deeper than they did.
Yeah, Roddy Gale from Ohio State, he led them with 26. Did an outstanding job. But, you know, he's had some moments this year. I think there was going to be an expectation to have a bigger impact. It's just taken some time, and obviously they've been so dominated with Wolf and Golden. But it's interesting. This is a bit of a trend of these first-year head coaches taking their teams to the Sweet 16. I mean, there are some veteran guys, but Grant McCaslin did it at Texas Tech. We've got Kevin Young, first year as a college coach. He was in the NBA, doing it with BYU. John Calipari, first year at Arkansas, gets there, and Dusty May. What a remarkable job he's done at Michigan, completely revamping this roster. There were only 2 returning players that contributed to them. They win the Big Ten tournament title after stumbling a little bit down the stretch, losing 3 in a row. Here they get by a very good Texas A&M team. You know, had to really sort of deal with adversity within the game to come back and win that game and really pull away in the second half. A significant victory for them. But remember, Dusty May now has tournament experience.
Right.
Just 2 years ago, led Florida Atlantic to the Final Four. So what a great run that he's on, led by the way, Vlad Golden was on that team. How about this, by the way, from the Florida Atlantic team? Vlad Golden with Michigan, Sweet 16. Janelle Davis with Arkansas, Sweet 16. Elijah Martin with Florida, Sweet 16. What does that also tell you? That Dusty May can recruit.
Yeah.
So good things on the horizon at Michigan.
Recruit and develop. And,
yes.
you know, with the way that, like you mentioned, Roddy Gale being able to take over, it feels like a team that's starting to find themselves. We saw Michigan find themselves during the Big Ten tournament, now in the Sweet 16, as versatile as any lineup out there. Wide variety of reasons to enjoy UCLA being members of the Big Ten Conference. Not only how fantastic they have already been in gymnastics, but everything they've been able to accomplish in a wide variety of sports. They won the Big Ten championship this past weekend as well with a 198.450 score. That is the highest team score ever recorded at the Big Ten championships. And as we referenced a bit earlier in the show, the UCLA women's basketball team has qualified for the Sweet 16, spent much of the season #1 in the country, and in the second half of their game against Richmond, we saw the way Lauren Betts took that one over. So we do know the Bruins are already moving on to next weekend. Let's go to Chloe Pavlich, one of our Big Ten Network basketball analysts, for a full recap of the women's action.
Don't get it twisted. This UCLA Bruins team is a national championship caliber team. And I know when you look at the score against Richmond, right, especially in the first half, things didn't go necessarily the way that UCLA wanted to, but this Richmond team is a really good NCAA tournament team. Here's what I want to see from the Bruins, though. When it comes to going far in the NCAA tournament, outside of having great guard play, you have to have double-digit scores. And what do I mean by that? Today, they had Tamia Gardner, they had Lauren Betts, they had Kiki Rice, but you have to start getting that consistent fourth and fifth double-digit score. Who could that be? It could be Gabriela Jaquez. But for me, I want to see it from Janiyah Barker. For me, it's Janiyah Barker that is the sleeper on this UCLA Bruin team and can really help UCLA go far and deep into the tournament. And why is that? She brings a different type of presence, not just on the offensive end, but the defensive end with her motor and being able to go inside and outside. Because when we watch UCLA, how good do they look when they play through Lauren Betts? Imagine if they could do that same thing with a 1-2 punch with Janiyah Barker.
Can't wait to watch what the Bruins continue to do. We do know what the Penn State Nittany Lions did on the mat. They won their 12th NCAA championship under Cael Sanderson, 13th in program history, and making that happen over the weekend. It's become expected at this point. It's like the annual ritual in wrestling that Penn State wins it all. And of course, as we mentioned a moment ago, Shane Sparks here to give us, because you were there on the scene, giving us your reaction to everything you saw there. Penn State and the run that they're on right now as a team, I mean, it feels historic. We know certain programs have been dominant at certain points. But what stands out about what the Nittany Lions and Cael Sanderson are accomplishing?
What stood out for me this weekend was 10 All-Americans. 8 guys in the top 3, of course, led by their 2 national champions, but 8 guys in the top 3. That means showing some grit on the backside. They were 17-1 on the backside of the bracket. I always say it's that backside of the bracket. That's when you find out what you're truly made of. An unbelievable tournament for Penn State. And I don't use the word unbelievable often, but I'm going to use it with Penn State and what they did in Philadelphia. Incredible.
And it felt like this was a deep field, that the folks were finding ways to test Penn State, to test their mettle, and they just responded over and over again. In what ways was this? Like, as the championships you've watched Penn State win, was there something about this one that seemed perhaps even a bit more challenging?
I go back to those 10 All-Americans. This has not been done since 2001, Minnesota, and the Gophers were the only team to ever have done it. So that, just the way they compete, it's very well documented. Gratitude, take advantage of the opportunity. It is such a phenomenal team. They just find a way to get it done. Super impressive. Talk about Nebraska. They were second. Iowa was fourth. So again, Big Ten, 3 of the top 4 teams. 12 Big Ten teams had an All-American. So it's tough. The parity of college wrestling, so much talent. Guys showing up young, expecting to win, getting the job done. It was an incredible performance for Cael Sanderson and Penn State.
Yes, the pressure associated with that, like you mentioned, just immense, because you show up knowing that you're expected to win it all, and nothing less than that is acceptable at Penn State. Well, you spent some time afterwards with perhaps the GOAT, one of the all-time greats, Carter Starace, made it happen again, 5th national championship. Here was Shane's conversation with him after winning it all.
Starace making history tonight, the first ever 5-time Division I national champion. When you hear those words, Carter, what's going on in your mind?
I mean, it's truly a blessing. For me, I'm just really grateful for it's the moment and the opportunity, and obviously just it's being on this team means the most. I mean, that means much more than 5 national titles, and obviously all this stuff is won way before today, you know what I mean? So you kind of see it every day, so it almost feels familiar, but again, just very grateful for every single thing. My family, my coaches, my team, my opponents, just the whole thing.
Part of another team title at Penn State. Describe the impact Cael Sanderson and the coaching staff have had on you.
You can ask every single kid on this program. I mean, those guys truly, truly love us, and I feel like it's much deeper than wrestling, and I feel like that's why these guys come out here and we battle so hard, especially in those big moments. You know what I mean? When you have guys like those guys in your corner, I mean, you'll do anything. If Coach Cael said, "Hey Carter, I need you to cut your arm off tomorrow," I'm chopping that thing off.
A lot of those All-Americans like you're talking about here, Shane, but I mean, none more decorated, none more successful than what we've just seen from Carter Starace. You and I even texted a bit just about his all-time greatness and what he's meant to Penn State and this sport. How has he been able to attain this degree of consistent success?
I've said it before, from a pure competitive standpoint, he is the most competitive guy that I have ever seen. Carter Starace, my guess is this: for breakfast, it's nails with sand and washing it down with some gasoline. He's just so gritty and tough. Go back to that national championship run he had a year ago. He had to be 2 national champions. He was injured, found a way to get it done in beating Parker Keckheisen. Keckheisen from Northern Iowa, the Panther, the reigning national champion at this weight class. Keckheisen bonus his weight at the top of the podium a season ago. He was undefeated this season. Bonus points machine. Great competitor in his own right. And Starace just finds a way to get it done. I will tell you this: you never trip on 5, as he would say, natty daddies.
And he has earned every one of those. And we know, whether you're talking Penn State or other programs, a lot of guys have won their national titles, been All-American several times. Where in the pantheon, where do you stack Carter Starace up with some of the other all-time greats?
From competitive standpoint, as I said before, the toughest guy I've ever seen. From a wrestling standpoint, he's a phenomenal wrestler. He's got great technique. He's got all of that. But he relies on what's between the ears.
Okay.
That's where he gets it done. When I think about the all-time greats, he's definitely in the conversation. If you are a top 10, top 20 all-time in Division I college wrestling, you're pretty darn good. But to win 5, he stands alone on that mountaintop. That'll be something that can never be taken away from him. And he had to earn it the hard way. But he loves it. And that's what I like about Carter Starace. He loves the deep waters. He's so mentally tough, believes in himself. And he had one line this week. He said, "I don't chase records. They chase me." He's got some confidence and some swagger that I've never seen before. But in this Division I college wrestling landscape, that's where it starts. You've got to believe it. You got to believe it. And he always believes in himself.
I mean, just competitive dynamos all over the mat. There's no doubt about that. And not only Carter Starace getting it done at a high level, Mitchell Messenbrink. Starace was at 84, Messenbrink at 165, and he's able to, with the 8-2 win a national title for Penn State. What stood out about what you saw from Messenbrink?
Mitchell Messenbrink scores points. He loves to be out there. I'm not sure anybody loves to wrestle more than Mitchell Messenbrink. He's become a real fan favorite. Last season against David Carr of Iowa State, came up a little bit short. The Cyclone won on a riding time point. I believe it was a 9-8 final. He came out this year and has just really imposed his will on the competition. Had to beat a really tough Mikey Caliendo of Iowa for the 3rd time this season to win that national title. But I think for Messenbrink, he's got that line that came from his dad. He scores points like a rat on a Cheeto. That's how he wrestles. Just a lot of freedom. The more wrestling that happens, better things happen for Mitchell Messenbrink. What stands out for me is how much he loves the sport. He loves being out there, scores a lot of points. He wants to scrap. You're not going to see Mitchell Messenbrink in a 2-1 match or even a 4-1 match. This guy averages about 17, 18 points a match. He's going to bring it, scores points, gets that first national championship. He's fun to watch.
Is he the style of wrestler that it almost feels like the team feeds off of because he sets the tone and the tempo he attacks with is almost, something that you can maybe be galvanized by?
They've had so many greats at Penn State over the years. I would say, in my opinion, he's kind of become the face of the program. Again, just with his attitude, smiles, raises the roof. I mean, he's just one of those guys. And Penn State, as we know with them, it's about getting better. One thing that I've just really come to appreciate with them is it's not results driven. And at first, of course, it's about winning. We get that. But they have created a culture and a mentality of, you know what? You worry about your effort. You worry about scoring points. You worry about getting better at wrestling. And I know it's cliche, but it is so true. The results will take care of themselves. Score points. Win the next position. Have fun doing it. Work hard getting to the point you want to get to. Just score points and worry about the next thing.
Well, when you win at that level, there's no doubt that it's going to be a lot of fun in State College. And it also did my Hawkeye heart very well to see where when you add a player like Stephen Buchanan into things, then it gives you the opportunity to expect big things. And he really delivered with a national championship for the Hawkeyes.
One of my favorite streaks in all of college wrestling, extended by the Hawkeyes at this national tournament. They had 3 in the finals. 35 straight tournaments where they have had a national finalist. I love that streak. It began back in 1990 when they had 3 finalists, 2 of those guys, Tom and Terry Brands. Stephen Buchanan came to Iowa, one of those transfers, began his career at Wyoming, then went to Oklahoma, ended in Iowa City, 197-pound national champion. His only loss this season was to Jacob Cardenas of Michigan in that Big Ten final. But he is a great representation of that program. I really like him. Really calm, cool, collected guy. And he went out there and beat Josh Barr of Penn State. Ends his career as a national champion, now a 4-time national champion, and he did it at 3 different schools. He was really good all season long for Iowa.
Just a remarkable career he's put together, like you mentioned, at 3 different schools. I mean, that transition you go through is not an easy thing as a college athlete. Would you be willing to hang for a few minutes and come back?
Absolutely.
Talk more wrestling later?
I'm hoping we got, 5-6 hours left of talking college wrestling. I'll stay if
because
you'll
you
stay.
didn't get enough over the weekend. We'll get more from Shane Sparks later in the show to break down everything else that took place in the wrestling space. But more hoops on the way right now because we are top to bottom Big Ten results in basketball. 4 teams from Big Ten men's basketball have qualified for the Sweet 16. So half of the Big Ten representatives that made the NCAA tournament continue to play at this point: Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue, which means if 4 of the 8 that qualified, then there are 4 that did not move on. But before we end up getting to the teams that are continuing in the NCAA tournament, some news that is circulating right now. As of this show, as of taping at this moment, nothing official out of the Twin Cities, but a lot of reporting about what Niko Medved could potentially end up becoming, as it relates to Minnesota basketball.
Yeah, multiple media outlets are reporting that Niko Medved will be the next head coach at Minnesota. I can tell you that once Ben Johnson was relieved of his job at the beginning of selection week, once they were eliminated from the Big Ten tournament, the expectation was that Niko Medved would likely be the candidate. And then what happened? Colorado State ends up winning the Mountain West Conference tournament. Then they win their first round game against Memphis. Then I was there on Sunday night, and they almost beat Maryland. Look, let me just say this about Niko Medved. From Minnesota, everywhere he goes, he wins. He's done an unbelievable job at Colorado State, getting in the NCAA tournament multiple times, getting pros to come through there. Isaiah Stevens, David Roddy, Nick Clifford, this latest example. They continue to produce, and I'm going to throw in there John Tonje, okay? All Big Ten player who started his career at Colorado State, then goes to Missouri, then Wisconsin. So Niko Medved does an outstanding job of developing talent, retaining it, and then winning. And so if this all plays out, I think it'll be a home run hire for Minnesota to bring Niko home.
Well, we will, of course, watch that situation extremely closely. So make sure all those who are curious about what's happening with the Gophers continue to tune in for the Big Ten Network and evaluating that news and that situation. But the action that took place over the weekend, there were 4 teams that do not advance in the men's NCAA tournament. Let's start with the Illini, who lost after an impressive performance in their first round game. The Illini lose in the round of 32, and it felt to me like Brad Underwood always communicated about this season's team with a pretty accurate perspective. Really high ceiling, but there were a lot of things off the court and from a health and an illness perspective that did impact their consistency.
Yeah, look, it was very difficult. They had to redo the entire roster. It's unfortunate that they were never fully healthy, and they just were wildly inconsistent. I mean, we saw them have some great performances like that Friday night victory over Purdue late in the season. But I saw their worst. I mean, I saw that game against Duke at the Garden when they lost by 43. We saw them destroy Iowa in the Big Ten tournament, but then get destroyed by Maryland. So, I mean, all over the place. And then this NCAA tournament was kind of a microcosm. Very difficult to knock out Kentucky. And we'll see who returns. But I have no question they'll be back, and they'll be just as good, if not better.
We certainly see Brad Underwood is one in a variety of ways, various forms and schematics of the sport, and it's a young core. So to your point, if they return intact, this should be something the Illini can build off of. In Madison, now you got Wisconsin. And John Tonje looked like he could have gone off for maybe 40 or 50 points the way he began
Almost
to
got
roll.
there.
Fighting back into that game against BYU. We were talking earlier about Derek Queen, him hitting the game-winning shot. John Tonje's opportunity didn't go as well.
Yeah, look, when the bracket came out, and so much of it is about matchups and location, I knew this was going to be a difficult draw. I knew that if BYU beat VCU and Wisconsin advanced past Montana, this was going to be one of the toughest draws for any Big Ten team because you're playing at altitude against BYU, which has a massive fan base in that mountain region, especially in Colorado. BYU just outscored them. They could not keep up offensively. You know, they made this great comeback. Last possession didn't go their way. You know, I think if they're kicking themselves, it might be actually what happened in the last regular season game. Because if Wisconsin had beaten Penn State at home on Senior Day, I don't think they would have received this seed in this position. They had a great run in the Big Ten tournament. Maybe that doesn't happen if they don't lose that game on the previous weekend. But that loss, I think, knocked them back and put them in this scenario.
Well, the scenario for UCLA is where the Bruins are not able to move on in their own right as well. One of the top defensive teams in the country the entire season, but Tennessee and, you know, big Volunteers contingent seem to be there at the game as well. And Mick Cronin talked about it a bit after the game. I mean, to hold that offense with that talent to 67 points, his concerns were more about where the Bruins were at offensively than what they were able to do in trying to stymie Tennessee defensively.
And that's exactly what happened. And again, very similar microcosm to their season like Illinois, where very good performance against Utah State and then not able to score well enough against one of the best defenses in the country in Tennessee. Think back to the last regular season game for UCLA. They beat USC. They pound them at home. Then they go to the Big Ten tournament and kind of flop. And so that was kind of UCLA this season. At home, for the most part, outside of when they played Minnesota and Michigan, they were really good at home. On the road or neutrals, kind of shaky. And that's exactly what happened to the Bruins in the tournament. Again, they should be really good depending upon who returns.
And we know that Mick Cronin, all the winning he's done, and, you know, he's made deep tournament runs before, certainly at UCLA. So no reason to think, regardless of what exactly goes on with their lineup, UCLA will be in a strong position again. Can make a very similar case about Dana Altman and Oregon. And it felt like the Ducks were right there on the cusp. I was thinking maybe that was going to be the fifth Big Ten team that could make it. Two programs that know each other well, but Arizona able to hold off Oregon as the Ducks are making a comeback.
Yeah, Caleb Love had a phenomenal performance. I was there on Sunday night. Look, I talked to Dana Altman at halftime. It was a little fool's gold. They got off that unbelievable start. They're running up and down. That wasn't their game. They get up by 15, but Arizona calmed down and settled down, and then they made it their game. And once that game got above 70 or 80, the track record shows, the stats don't lie. Dana Altman was 0-4 against Tommy Lloyd at Arizona when it was 70 or more points for Arizona, 2-0 when it was below. Once it got about that number, they were likely going to lose. They did have a chance to win it, not able to down the stretch. But again, Oregon trending in the right direction, depending upon who returns. And if Jackson Shelstead is back, he's a Player of the Year candidate in the Big Ten. So I think high hopes for all four of these teams that weren't able to get to the Sweet 16.
And, you know, a lot of one-on-one, but you have individual talent for Oregon that can get that done at a high level. I know you guys were talking about even a bit during the broadcast, just offensively how they operate. Dana Altman, he will get that part figured out regardless of who returns in his lineup as well. We always love when you return to our lineup,
Thank
Andy.
you.
I'm sure you got some more flyer miles that are on the way throughout the rest of your
Love
NCAA
being here in
tour.
person.
Good. We love having you here in Chicago.
And it's me. It's not a hologram.
Yes. Well, CGI, maybe, but not a hologram. Let's get back on the mat in a moment. Shade Sparks will break down some of the other big storyline that happened with the NCAA Wrestling Championships on the line. Conference championship was on the line over the weekend, and the Michigan State Spartans able to win the Big Ten tournament title for the second straight year. They were led to that title by Isaac Howard, had 3 goals in the tournament, 2 assists, 5 points overall. A couple game winners as well in winning the most outstanding player. And so now you have 4 different Big Ten teams qualifying for the NCAA hockey tournament. Michigan State, number 1 seed in Toledo. Minnesota, the number 2 seed in Fargo. Ohio State, the 3 seed in Toledo. And Penn State, the 4 seed in Allentown. Michigan State, number 2 overall seed in the entire NCAA ice hockey tournament. Shane Sparks, as promised, I was not lying to you. He's back here to talk a bit more wrestling. And beyond Penn State, a number of other individual, talented wrestlers and teams had fantastic performances. Really felt like Nebraska ended up being one of the big storylines coming out of things.
How about those Cornhuskers? Go Big Red. 8 All-Americans, 2 national champions. Ridge Lovett at 149, punched his way to the top. He was an NCAA finalist back in 2022, lost to Yanni Diakomahalis. And one of the favorite stories of this entire tournament, Antrell Taylor at 157. You talk about a guy that has battled adversity and has had to persevere. He lost his father and his brother in separate shooting instances. And the fact that he's been able to persevere, as I mentioned, and wins a national title in Philadelphia, to me, it was my favorite scene of the entire tournament, knowing what that young man has had to battle through. And he is a tremendous young man.
And a team like Nebraska, who you're up against that Penn State behemoth, how would you describe just the type of drive we saw from multiple Nebraska wrestlers and their team as a whole?
Jacob Van D, All-American at 133, lost in the first round. Camden McDaniel, All-American at 197, lost in the first round. These guys just battled. At 184 pounds, Silas Allred, he's been close. He's a Big Ten champion a couple years back. He found a way to get it done. Couple of wild matches early. I mentioned that word perseverance. Nebraska persevered, and it all starts at the top with Mark Manning. He was the tournament coach of the tournament, given that award. Mark Manning loves his guys as much as anybody else. He's always fired up. Best finish in program history, couple national champions, a great tournament for the Big Red of Nebraska.
A couple of individual performances to get to before we close. That match between Lucas Bird and Drake Ayala, and it going to 3-2 decision, but the tiebreak was something that was really a legendary win for Lucas Bird.
They know each other well. Lucas Bird, 2-time All-American, now 3-time All-American. He lost in the dual meet in Iowa City to Drake Ayala. He pinned the Hawkeye in the Big Ten final. Really good match. Lucas Bird, you knew it was going to be tight. He's really good with his positions, found a way to get it done. And another spectacular season. Drake Ayala for the second season winning the silver medal.
And to be able to get that silver medal, impressive performance from him. But then you also had Mendez from Ohio State able to get it done.
Jesse Mendez is a dog. Back-to-back national champion. He took a couple of losses this season, but he got it done once again at a very tough weight class. Guys like Bo Bartlett, Brock Hardy, Nebraska, Big Ten champion. Mendez had to find a way to get it done. Hardy beat him 9-8 in the Big Ten final, and Hardy got out to a 5-0 lead on Mendez. He stayed poised, just kept on wrestling, and that's the key. You got to stay poised, and it's easier said than done. You got 19,000 people going crazy, but Jesse Mendez to win another national title, really impressive because he has been the hunted.
One of the more surprising results from the entire weekend. When I was playing college football at Iowa, Brock Lesnar was at Minnesota. He was this legendary folk hero, and Gable Steveson had become that for the Gophers in this generation. He loses the national championship match. How surprising.
It's a little bit surprising, no doubt about it. When you look at Gable Steveson, he had won 70 straight matches coming in to that championship final. He's an Olympic champion. He's a 4-time Big Ten champion. He's a 2-time NCAA champion with stops with the WWE, and he spent some time in Bill's training camp this past fall. He had a phenomenal career. He still will go down as one of the all-time greats, no question.
And he's able to make that happen. And we'll see, I'm sure, whether it's in wrestling, somewhere else in public life, perhaps in football, who knows? Gable Steveson will continue to find himself in the public eye, and he'll be successful in whatever that ends up being. We try to be successful for everyone here today. Really appreciate you as always. Shane Sparks, thanks to Andy Katz as well. Continue to track all the coverage of the Big Ten championships that are happening in a wide variety of sports, all the basketball coverage that goes on here. Thanks as well to Chloe Pavlich for being with us here on Big Ten Today.